What you're about to hear is the story of a young girl whose disappearance shook an entire community. A 14-year-old full of life, laughter, and dreams, gone without a trace in the Arizona desert. For weeks, her family searched, praying for a miracle. What they found instead was a tragedy that raised more questions than answers. This is not just a story of loss. It's a story about silence, fear, and the shadows that hide in plain sight. Before we begin, subscribe and stay with us, because this time the truth might be closer than we think. January 27th, 2025, began like any other winter morning in Prescott, Arizona. The air was crisp, the sun cut through the thin desert clouds, and students hurried to class before the chill set in. Among them was Emily Pike, a quiet but bright 14-year-old freshman at Willow Creek High. She had a passion for drawing, cross-country running, and desert sunsets. Friends described her as shy but warm, the kind of girl who smiled at everyone but rarely spoke about herself. That Monday afternoon, Emily left school at 3:05 p.m. She texted her best friend, "See you tomorrow, gotta finish my project." It would be the last message she ever sent. She lived less than a mile from the school, in a quiet subdivision near the edge of the desert. Her route home, a narrow sidewalk that cut through dry grass and scrub, was one she walked every day. But that afternoon, she never made it home. At 4:20 p.m., when her mother, Laura Pike, returned from work, she found Emily's backpack still missing and her phone going straight to voicemail. By 5:30 p.m., panic had set in. Laura drove the entire route between the school and their home, stopping at every crossroad, every bush, calling her daughter's name. By 7 p.m., Prescott police had been notified. Officers canvassed the area, knocking on doors, speaking with neighbors. A few people recalled seeing a teenage girl near the trail, but none could describe her in detail. One woman mentioned a white pickup truck idling nearby, something that didn't belong in that neighborhood. Police searched through the night, using drones and K-9 units. They found footprints near the trail, size 6 sneakers, but they faded into the sand just beyond the tree line. No struggle, no blood, no sign of Emily. The next morning, January 28th, the story hit local news. 14-year-old girl missing in Prescott. Police ask for public's help. Her photo, brown hair, green eyes, and a nervous half-smile, began circulating online. Within hours, hundreds of volunteers joined the search. But as daylight broke, investigators realized something far more disturbing. There were no security cameras along her route home, and no one could confirm seeing her past 3:15 p.m. It was as if she had simply vanished. The desert had swallowed many secrets before. Now it had taken a child. The morning after Emily Pike's disappearance, Prescott Police Department mobilized one of the largest search operations the small city had ever seen. Dozens of officers, firefighters, and volunteers spread across the Willow Creek corridor, scouring every dirt path, drainage ditch, and thicket of mesquite for a trace of the 14-year-old girl who'd vanished on her short walk home. The command post was set up at Willow Creek Park, where Emily's parents, Laura and David Pike, waited through sleepless hours, clutching photos of their daughter. A snapshot from her last birthday, wearing a denim jacket and a shy smile. By midday, local news vans crowded the parking lot. Reporters broadcast live from the scene, their microphones trembling in the winter wind. "Authorities believe time is critical," one anchor said solemnly. "Temperatures in the desert can drop dangerously low at night." But for investigators, the problem wasn't just the cold, it was the silence. No phone activity, no digital trail. Her smartwatch had disconnected from GPS at exactly 3:14 p.m. The trail ended there. At 2 p.m., police requested aerial support. Drones mapped the area, and a state helicopter flew over the dry basin north of town. Nothing, just miles of cactus, brush, and open land, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Neighbors joined the effort. One man brought his own ATV, combing the arroyos until sunset. Another woman organized a candlelight vigil in front of the Pike home, her voice breaking as she spoke. "Emily could be any of our daughters. We can't let her become another name on a missing poster. Inside the investigation room, detectives worked against the clock. They reviewed school footage from that day. Emily walking down the hall, waving to a teacher, exiting through the south gate. No one followed her. No one suspicious appeared on camera. But one clue emerged from a nearby gas station's surveillance footage. At 3:18 p.m., just 4 minutes after Emily was last seen, a white Ford F-150 drove north past the school zone. Investigators froze the frame, zoomed in on the license plate. It was too blurry to read. Still, they now had a vehicle of interest. The Pike family pleaded publicly for whoever took Emily to let her go. Laura appeared on local TV, her voice shaking. "Emily, if you can hear me, we love you. Please come home." Over the next 72 hours, hundreds of volunteers fanned out across 3 square miles of rugged terrain. They found water bottles, candy wrappers, shoe prints, all logged, all examined, but none matched Emily's DNA. By the 4th day, the FBI joined the investigation, labeling the case high-risk juvenile abduction. The town of Prescott, once known for its peaceful desert sunsets, was now gripped by fear. And as the days passed, one truth became clear. This was no runaway case. Someone had taken Emily Pike. 3 days after Emily's disappearance, investigators finally caught their first break. A mechanic in Chino Valley, 20 miles north of Prescott, called police after recognizing a vehicle described in local coverage. A white Ford F-150, early 2000s model, with a broken rear taillight. The man said he'd seen it parked off Old Highway 89 around 4 p.m. on January 27th, the day Emily went missing. He remembered it because the driver, a man in his late 30s with a beard and a dark baseball cap, had been cleaning something from the passenger side door. "He looked nervous," the mechanic said, "like he didn't want to be seen." Detectives arrived within the hour. Tire tracks still marked the shoulder where the truck had been parked. A partial print was cast and sent for analysis, but desert wind and rain had already eroded most of the detail. Back in Prescott, authorities released a BOLO, be on the lookout, alert for a white F-150 with damage to the right taillight. Tips flooded in. Too many, in fact. Arizona highways were filled with identical trucks. The investigation risked drowning in false leads. Meanwhile, digital forensics traced Emily's final phone signal again. The ping location sat less than 800 yards from that same stretch of highway. It wasn't conclusive, but the overlap was impossible to ignore. Then came a witness. A 16-year-old student from Emily's school, Kayla Morrison, told investigators that she'd noticed a white pickup truck idling near the back gate of the campus on January 27th. She didn't think much of it at the time, until she saw the news later that night. "It was just sitting there," Kayla said, "like it was waiting for someone." Sketch artists worked from her description. Dark cap, light beard, pale eyes, late 30s or early 40s. Within 24 hours, posters of the Prescott truck suspect were plastered across town. Leads began connecting. A convenience store clerk remembered the same man buying 2 bottles of water and gas around 3:40 p.m., heading north. Surveillance footage showed his vehicle leaving the lot. Investigators finally had a clearer view of the license plate, partially visible digits. 7X2. It was enough to narrow the search to 50 registered vehicles across northern Arizona. By February 2nd, detectives had zeroed in on one owner, Derek Hall, a 39-year-old construction worker with a minor criminal record for trespassing and disorderly conduct. He lived alone in a trailer near Polden, surrounded by acres of desolate land. When questioned, Hall appeared calm, cooperative, even friendly. "I don't know any Emily Pike," he said. "I was driving up north that day for a job in Ash Fork." He provided a handwritten log of his route, detailed, rehearsed. Still, investigators felt something was off. A warrant was drafted for his property, and what they discovered there would change the direction of the case forever. On the morning of February 3rd, 2025, deputies from the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office arrived at the rural property belonging to Derek Hall. His small trailer sat on a patch of dry, sun-beaten land near Polden, surrounded by rusted machinery, piles of scrap metal, and scattered animal bones that glowed white under the Arizona sun. It was eerily quiet. No barking dogs, no running vehicles, just wind moving through the desert brush. Hall greeted the officers casually, a half smile on his face. "Still trying to pin this on me, huh?" he said, leaning against the doorway. His voice was calm, but his eyes, sharp and restless, told another story. Detectives served the search warrant, citing probable cause based on the truck description, the surveillance footage, and the proximity to Emily's last phone signal. Hall cooperated, but his composure began to fracture when they brought in cadaver dogs. Within minutes, the dogs alerted near the rear of the property, where a makeshift shed stood, its door padlocked, the metal frame partially buried in the sand. Deputy Moreno called for bolt cutters. When the door swung open, a wave of stale air and oil hit them. Inside, tools, tarps, an old tire and something else, a single white sneaker, size 6. The tread pattern matched the partial footprint found near the Willow Creek Trail. Hall froze, his face drained of color. "That shoe's been there for months," he muttered. "I don't know whose that is." Forensics bagged the sneaker and began a full sweep. Behind the shed, they uncovered a fire pit, half buried and filled with ashes. Among the charred remains, melted plastic, bits of glass, and what looked like small fragments of bone. When asked, Hall said it was just animal stuff, but investigators noted the bones were unusually small and cylindrical, consistent with human finger joints. The site was sealed off. Evidence markers sprouted across the sand like grim flowers. Drones photographed every inch. One deputy walked the property perimeter and found tire tracks identical to those seen on Old Highway 89. Back at the command post, detectives sent the shoe and bone fragments for immediate analysis. Within 24 hours, results confirmed the DNA on the shoe belonged to Emily Pike. But that was all they had. No body, no eyewitnesses, no clear cause of death. Hall was arrested for obstruction and tampering with evidence, but prosecutors hesitated to file homicide charges. Without a body, the case was dangerously thin. Meanwhile, Emily's family clung to fading hope. "If she's out there somewhere," her mother said through tears, "we just want to bring her home." 2 weeks later, on February 14, 2025, Valentine's Day, the desert finally gave up its secret. A hiker found what the police had missed. Valentine's Day, 2025. While much of Arizona woke to flowers and pink skies, a lone hiker named Thomas Rivera set out on an early morning trek through the Granite Basin Recreation Area, about 12 miles northwest of Prescott. The path wound through red stone ridges and narrow washes, the same rugged terrain volunteers had scoured just weeks before. Rivera was used to solitude, but what he found that morning would end the town's quiet hope forever. At 9:42 a.m., he called 911. His voice was trembling. I think I found a body," he said, "or what's left of one." Deputies arrived within the hour. The site was remote, accessible only by a dirt track that snaked through cactus and boulder fields. There, beneath a low mesquite bush, lay a partially buried skeleton, small, fragile, unmistakably human. Torn fragments of athletic clothing clung to the remains, and beside them, a cracked smartwatch still faintly glimmered beneath the sand. Forensics later confirmed what everyone already feared. The remains belonged to 14-year-old Emily Pike. The cause of death was classified as homicide, though the coroner couldn't determine the exact method. The bones showed no clear fractures or gunshot wounds, but traces of burn damage suggested an attempt to destroy evidence, consistent with the fire pit found on Derek Hall's property. The discovery sent shockwaves through Prescott. Candlelight vigils erupted across the city that evening. Flowers and drawings covered the Pike family's front lawn. Classmates left letters, bracelets, and small stones painted with Emily's name. For the Pike family, the moment was a mix of devastation and fragile relief. "She's home," Laura whispered to reporters, clutching her daughter's photo. "Not the way we prayed for, but she's home." Detectives wasted no time linking the remains to Hall. His alibi collapsed when GPS data from his cell phone placed him within 2 miles of the burial site on the afternoon of January 27th. The timestamps aligned with Emily's last phone ping. Prosecutors upgraded his charges to first-degree murder, citing premeditation and concealment of evidence. Hall maintained his innocence, claiming someone had planted the items on his property. But every test, every trace of evidence, drew the circle tighter. In the following days, the small Arizona town that had once prayed for a miracle now demanded justice. At the memorial service, Emily's best friend, Kayla Morrison, spoke through tears. She was supposed to grow up, to go to prom, to see the ocean. We'll never get to know the woman she would have become. As the sun set behind the red ridges, the crowd released white balloons that drifted silently into the golden sky, the same sky that had watched her disappear. The desert had returned her body, but it still held her story. By the time detectives brought Derek Hall back into the interview room on February 16, 2025, the air inside Prescott's sheriff's office was thick with tension. The evidence had changed everything. Emily Pike's remains were found. Her DNA was on Hall's property. His phone data placed him at the scene. Now the only question left was why. Hall sat across the table, slouched and expressionless, his hands cuffed. Detective Sarah Laird, a veteran with 15 years in homicide, leaned forward, her voice steady but sharp. "We know you were there, Derek. We can prove it. What we don't know is what happened next." Hall smirked faintly, his eyes flicking to the mirrored wall. "You think you know everything," he muttered. For 12 hours, detectives pressed him. They showed him satellite photos, phone logs, the shoe, the ashes. With each piece of evidence, Hall's facade began to crack. His answers grew shorter. His hands trembled. At one point he whispered, "It was an accident." But when asked to elaborate, he shut down again. "I want a lawyer," he said coldly, ending the interview. Still, investigators had more than enough to hold him. Forensic techs recovered fibers from Emily's hoodie inside Hall's truck, embedded deep in the seat fabric. In the bed of the vehicle, luminol testing revealed faint traces of blood. It wasn't visible to the naked eye, but under ultraviolet light, the outline of a small handprint glowed blue against the metal. The lab confirmed it matched Emily's DNA. Detective Laird returned to the interrogation room the next day. She placed a photo of the handprint in front of Hall. "She fought you, didn't she?" Hall stared at the photo for several seconds, his expression frozen between defiance and despair. Then quietly, almost to himself, he said, "She wouldn't stop screaming." That sentence was enough. From that point on, Hall's attorney handled every communication, but prosecutors didn't need a confession. The evidence told its own story. Emily had been abducted while walking home, taken to Hall's property, and killed within hours. The fire pit was his attempt to destroy what was left. During a press conference, Sheriff Dan Holloway spoke bluntly. This was not random. This was predatory. Emily Pike's courage in her final moments helped us bring her killer to justice. Public outrage swept through Arizona. Online communities flooded with tributes and fury. True crime podcasts dissected every frame of Hall's body language. People demanded the death penalty. In custody, Hall grew withdrawn. He refused meals, spoke to no one, and spent his days staring at the cinder block wall of his cell. Officers described him as haunted, muttering at night about the girl in the desert. But even as the confession hung between words and silence, prosecutors knew the hardest part was yet to come, proving murder beyond doubt in a courtroom where every second of Emily's final day would be relived. By May 2025, the case of State of Arizona versus Derek Hall had become national news. Every major network covered it. Every true crime podcast dissected it. And outside the courthouse in Prescott, protesters stood with posters that read, "Justice for Emily." Inside, her parents sat silently in the front row, faces pale, hands intertwined, a picture of exhaustion and courage. The prosecution's case was brutal in its simplicity. Derek Hall abducted, murdered, and attempted to destroy the remains of 14-year-old Emily Pike. They presented a timeline built on phone data, vehicle forensics, and DNA evidence, each piece fitting together like shards of glass. At 3:12 p.m., Emily left school. At 3:18, Hall's truck was seen near the back gate. By 4:07, both phones, his and hers, were in the same cellular range. At 4:49, his GPS showed a complete stop for 17 minutes on a dirt road outside Polden, the exact area where her remains were found. The courtroom fell silent as prosecutors displayed images of the shoe, the handprint, the ash pit. The medical examiner testified about the bone fragments, the burn damage, and the possibility that she was still alive when the fire was lit. A few jurors wiped away tears. Hall's defense tried to paint a different picture, that investigators had built a case on assumptions and contamination. His lawyer argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that no murder weapon had been found, and that the DNA could have been planted. But when the prosecution played Hall's interrogation recording, the moment he whispered she wouldn't stop screaming, the defense table fell silent. The Pike family left the courtroom that day in tears. For 3 weeks, testimonies from witnesses, forensic experts, and classmates painted the story of a community broken by fear. One by one, people took the stand to humanize Emily, her teacher, her track coach, her best friend Kayla, each reminding the jury that she wasn't just a headline, she was a child. When the time came for closing arguments, District Attorney Ellen Warner addressed the jury directly. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. Derek Hall took a child's life and tried to erase her from the earth. Emily Pike deserves justice, and you are the only ones who can give it to her. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The foreman's voice was steady, but heavy. We, the jury, find the defendant, Derek Hall, guilty of first-degree murder. A collective exhale filled the courtroom. Laura Pike buried her face in her husband's shoulder. Reporters rushed to the steps outside as the verdict echoed through the town. Hall showed no emotion as he was led away. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor, a man swallowed by his own silence. The judge set the sentencing date for June 14, 2025, but for the Pikes, the verdict was only half the battle. What came next would determine whether justice would finally match the horror of what had been done. June 14, 2025, the day justice would finally be spoken aloud. The courtroom in Prescott was packed, every seat taken. Reporters filled the aisles, cameras waiting for that one frozen moment when the man who took a 14-year-old girl's life would face the weight of his actions. Derek Hall entered wearing an orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled. His expression was vacant, his beard longer, his shoulders slumped as if the months of confinement had drained whatever remained of his defiance. Behind him sat armed deputies, and in front, a wall of grief. Emily Pike's parents sat side by side, clutching a folded piece of paper, a victim impact statement written by her mother, Laura. When her turn came, she rose slowly, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry through the silence. "Your Honor," she began, "for 19 days, we searched every inch of this desert, calling her name. I remember thinking she could hear me. I still think she can. Emily was kind. She was funny. She loved to draw little animals and dream about the ocean. But because of one man's cruelty, she never got to grow up. She never got to fall in love. She never got to live her life. So when you decide his punishment today, please remember, we live a life sentence too." The judge paused for several seconds before responding. Then, in measured tones, Judge Alan McReynolds delivered his ruling. "Derek Hall, you have been found guilty of the premeditated abduction and murder of Emily Pike. Your actions were calculated, deliberate, and inhumane. You showed no remorse, even as this community grieved. Therefore, it is the sentence of this court that you spend the remainder of your natural life in prison, without the possibility of parole." Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Hall blinked once, twice, then looked up, his expression unreadable. Some thought he might speak. Instead, he muttered a single word under his breath, "Finally." To this day, no one knows what he meant. After the hearing, the Pike family stood outside the courthouse surrounded by supporters and news crews. Laura's eyes were red, but her voice was calm. "Justice doesn't bring her back," she said softly, "but maybe it stops the next Emily." The town of Prescott held a candlelight vigil that night, lining the streets with thousands of flickering lights. At the center of the park stood a new sign: Emily Pike Memorial Trail. Runners, families, and children passed by it for months to come, whispering her name as if it could somehow fill the silence she left behind. The man who stole her life would never walk free again, but for those who loved her, freedom would always feel a little smaller. After the sentencing, Prescott, a once quiet, sun-bleached town in northern Arizona, was never the same. The story of Emily Pike had spread far beyond state lines, becoming a haunting reminder of how quickly innocence can vanish in the space of an afternoon. Before Emily's disappearance, Prescott was known for its mountain trails, family picnics, and small-town safety. But after January 2025, everything changed. Parents no longer let their kids walk to school alone. Joggers carried pepper spray. Security cameras appeared on every corner of Willow Creek Road, the path where Emily was last seen. At Willow Creek High, her empty desk remained untouched for weeks after her death. Classmates left notes and sketches where she once sat, hearts, flowers, and messages written in shaky handwriting. The school counselor's office overflowed with students, struggling to understand how someone so young could simply disappear and never come home. Local churches organized weekly gatherings in her memory. A mural of Emily was painted near the park, her smiling face surrounded by painted angel wings and the words, "Forever 14." People left flowers there every day, even months later. The tragedy also changed how local law enforcement handled missing persons cases. Within months, the Prescott Police Department launched a child safety task force, ensuring that every disappearance, no matter how small the lead, would receive an immediate response. Officers began holding school assemblies, teaching children how to recognize danger and distributing GPS bracelets to families who requested them. But not all changes were visible. For many in town, Emily's story became an open wound, a constant reminder of the fragility of life. Her best friend, Kayla Morrison, said during a local interview, "I still walk past her street sometimes. I look at her window and think she might open it, just to say hi. It's stupid, I know, but I can't help it." In the Pike home, Emily's bedroom stayed exactly as she left it, her drawings still taped to the walls, her sneakers neatly lined up by the door. Laura would sit there in silence some nights, tracing the lines of her daughter's sketches with trembling fingers. Even the desert, once a place of peace, now carried a different weight. Hikers who wandered through Granite Basin said they felt a strange heaviness there, a quiet sorrow woven into the sand. Locals began calling the area the Valley of Echoes, saying the wind there sounded almost like a voice, soft, distant, and endlessly repeating her name. For Prescott, the story of Emily Pike wasn't just a tragedy. It became a turning point, the day the illusion of safety was lost forever. Nearly a year after her disappearance, Emily Pike's name still echoed through Prescott, not as a headline, but as a symbol of resilience, love, and the collective promise that her story would never fade into silence. The town that once feared its shadows now learned to stand together in the light. Every January 27th, hundreds gathered along the Emily Pike Memorial Trail, candles flickering in the cool desert air, to walk the same path she took on that final day. Her classmates, now older, carried flowers. Strangers came from other towns just to honor her memory. Her mother, Laura Pike, always spoke last. She never brought notes. Her words came from somewhere deeper, from a place between pain and peace. "I used to ask why," she said softly one evening, her voice carrying across the field. "Why her? Why us? But now I ask how. How can we make sure this never happens again?" That question became the heart of a movement. With help from local lawmakers, Laura founded the Emily Pike Foundation, dedicated to early response training and safety education for families across Arizona. Within months, The foundation expanded statewide, funding community alerts, outdoor safety programs, and partnerships with schools. Emily's story was featured in documentaries, podcasts, and memorial exhibits. But for those who knew her best, her legacy wasn't about the tragedy. It was about her light. Her art notebooks were published in a small local book titled Pages of the Desert, filled with sketches of mountains, animals, and the word hope scribbled on nearly every page. The profits went entirely to missing children's charities. On the first anniversary of her passing, the sun set over Prescott in a wash of orange and gold, the same colors Emily used to paint in her school art projects. Her father, David, placed one of her drawings at the base of the memorial sign, whispering through tears, "You're still here, kiddo." And maybe in a way, she was. Because every time a missing child's face appeared on a poster, every time a search team refused to give up, and every time a stranger lit a candle for someone they never met, Emily lived on. The desert had taken her once. But through courage, love, and remembrance, the people she left behind made sure it could never take her story. What happened to Emily Pike broke a town, but it also awakened one. Her story reminds us that evil can hide anywhere, even in daylight, but so can courage. If you believe that every missing child deserves to be found, every victim deserves a voice, and every family deserves truth, help us share these stories. Like this video, subscribe and share Emily's story. Because somewhere, someone out there still needs to be found, and maybe your share, your voice, or your light can help bring them home.